There's this undeniable cultural pull toward the outlaw, the daring heist, the sophisticated disguise,
Oh,
the
absolutely.
figure who just seems to operate outside of all the rules. I mean, from the second people like Bonnie and Clyde hit the headlines, these stories have just captivated us.
And it's so much more than just a spectacle, right? It's this really potent cultural narrative. These figures, whether we're talking bank robbers or famous fugitives, they often become instant anti-heroes.
Because they reflect something back at us.
Exactly. They reflect a public distrust or maybe a discomfort with the powerful systems that they're defying. They're like a mirror for these deeper societal tensions.
That dual relationship, the criminal on one hand and the cultural symbol on the other, that's precisely the lens for this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission today is to connect that legendary 20th century outlaw archetype, think John Dillinger,
Willie Sovic.
the classics, yeah, and connect them to their modern day equivalents, figures like the Barefoot Bandit. And then we'll really analyze how these rebels and even the protest music they inspire, how they function as these powerful symbols.
Symbols of resistance and, I think, endangered identity, especially against big institutional power.
Right. And to guide us, we're going to use that famous and really deceptively simple dictum from Willie Sutton.
I rob banks because that's where the money is.
Exactly. But we're not just limiting that to literal dollars.
No, not at all. We're sort of using it as a guiding principle to understand where the ultimate power and conflict are in society and how that bank, the target, has evolved from, physical cash to things like centralized data, public identity, even institutional control.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start with that golden age of the classic outlaw. When we look at figures like Sutton or Dillinger, what was really propelling them? Was it just pure desperation? Or was there something, I don't know, more theatrical at play?
It was almost always a perfect storm of both. I mean, the motivation was often rooted in really serious financial hardship, especially coming out of the Depression era.
Of course.
But the successful ones, they quickly learned that the thrill, the adrenaline rush of a flawless, audacious heist that became a secondary and very addictive motivation.
But it was the planning that set them apart.
Oh, the meticulous planning. That's what separated the legends from the common criminals. These were not smash and grabs. We're talking about months, sometimes years of reconnaissance, studying schedules, devising these schemes that were tailored to bypass whatever security existed at the time.
And that meticulousness, it paid off spectacularly in some cases.
Yeah.
Like the 1963 Great Train Robbery in Britain. That's a perfect case study in audacity.
Incredible one. That gang stole 2.6 million pounds. In today's money, that's over 50 million pounds. And they stayed off the radar for a long time afterward. The planning it took to neutralize train signals, coordinate that kind of haul, it was practically military grade.
And then you have the masters of deception, the ones who they exposed institutional arrogance.
Yeah.
Like John Dillinger. He didn't just escape, he mocked the system.
He really did. That legendary escape from a police station, I mean, just by using a crude disguise and basically banking on the assumption that no one would dare challenge a fellow police officer, it just revealed this massive psychological chasm in their defenses.
Which is why he was so quickly branded public enemy number one.
Absolutely.
And similarly, Willie Sutton wasn't just known for robbing banks. He was famous for getting past security altogether. His escape from Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, that didn't just make headlines.
No, it exposed huge architectural and procedural vulnerabilities. It basically suggested that the institutional safeguards designed to contain him were just fundamentally flawed.
And that, ironically, is where the legend is born, right?
Yeah.
In their ability to expose the fragility of power.
Exactly. But this era of audacity, it forced an equally audacious response. Sutton's exploits specifically drove financial institutions to rethink security from the ground up.
So this is when we start to see the changes.
This is the period when surveillance cameras start to become standard. Vaults were heavily reinforced with new engineering, and alarm systems went from just being loud local bells to silent alarms that were linked directly to law enforcement.
And on the government side, this whole era, it forced an end to strictly local policing, didn't it?
It had to. The realization that these criminals were crossing state lines with ease, it pushed investigators toward, necessary collaboration. The pursuit of men like Dillinger and Sutton led directly to the formalized creation of specialized units, like the FBI's bank robbery task forces. It created a national response.
Beyond just the physical security, though, the response evolved psychologically, too.
Oh, hugely. Forensic science started getting integrated much more seriously. The standardized collection of fingerprints, early DNA analysis, but crucially, the need to anticipate and understand these complex criminals, that prompted what we now recognize as modern psychological profiling.
So they started asking different questions.
Right. What are the underlying behavioral patterns of a successful bank robber? Sutton wasn't just a criminal. He was, in a way, an accelerator of modern crime fighting.
So the classic outlaw was focused squarely on the literal bank where the money was concentrated.
Mm.
But as we pivot into the 21st century, the target, it seems to shift. It moves away from cash and more toward, what? Autonomy, lifestyle, media presence.
I think that's a perfect way to put it.
Which brings us to a modern fugitive who really defined this shift. Colton Harris Moore, known everywhere as the Barefoot Bandit.
Harris Moore is the perfect 21st century parallel, but the context is so different. His background was trouble. He was struggling with depression, ADHD, a difficult upbringing. His mother reportedly named him after Colt 45 malt liquor.
Wow.
He was convicted of possession of stolen property by the time he was 12. His rebellion was rooted less in organized financial gain and much more in this profound isolation and defiance.
And it started as pure survivalism, right?
Mm.
After he escaped a juvenile group home in 2008.
Exactly. He began by living in the wilderness, breaking into these isolated vacation homes just for necessities. Food, water, sometimes just stealing ice cream or soaking in a hot bath. It was about reclaiming comfort, reclaiming existence outside the system.
But the crimes escalated pretty quickly.
They escalated rapidly. The goal shifted from just survival to sophisticated luxury and, maybe most importantly, evasion. He wasn't just stealing cash, he was taking high-value, portable items, laptops, cell phones, and famously, once, a pair of $6,500 night vision goggles.
And the sheer scale of his movement, that showed his total disregard for borders or any kind of centralized control.
And his primary method of evasion. Well, it wasn't deception like Dillinger. It was just raw, large-scale movement across state and even international lines. And he used stolen infrastructure to do it.
He stole cars, a boat, and, this is the most incredible part. He was federally charged for stealing and piloting 3 separate aircraft.
Without ever having a valid pilot certificate.
Right. And he crash-landed the last one in the Bahamas. That's not a bank robber. That's a sophisticated infrastructural rebel.
Exactly. And his nickname just cemented his brand. By leaving his bare footprints, sometimes even drawing them at a scene with a taunting CYA, he was intentionally crafting his own iconic signature. He wasn't just a criminal. He was a performance artist of rebellion.
Okay, so that brings up a really critical question.
Yeah.
If he was just a thief who stole vehicles and high-end goods, why did the public and the media so actively romanticize him? Why was he celebrated as this anarchic and footloose wilderness rebel?
Because he represented a profound cultural wish. In a world that feels so saturated with digital surveillance, financial centralization, and just, suffocating suburban materialism.
He was the opposite of all that.
He was the complete opposite. Here's Harris Moore, operating barefoot in the wild, defying the entire aviation regulatory system. He became a symbol of just pure, unadulterated autonomy. His crimes were often reframed in the popular narrative as a rejection of materialism.
And he controlled his own image, too.
He did. The fact that he used a stolen camera to snap a self-portrait, creating his own iconic wanted image, that shows he understood something crucial. In the modern age, control over the narrative is just as valuable as stolen cash. He basically robbed the bank of attention and identity.
That idea of narrative control, that's a perfect pivot point. That shift from the individual defying the money bank to the individual defying the structures that define our identity, it leads us right into how these outlaw figures get co-opted in folklore and music to voice this kind of collective resistance.
Absolutely. If Harris Moore was challenging the suburban ideal, you have other figures who challenge the very definition of a regional identity, often by romanticizing self-sufficiency.
You're thinking of the North Pond Hermit.
Christopher Knight, in Maine. For 27 years, he lived in complete isolation in the Maine woods. He committed hundreds of burglaries just to get necessities, and he wasn't captured until 2013.
And the public reaction there in Maine was just this extensive romanticization of him. Why?
Because the hermit embodied a threatened local ideal. Self-sufficiency, stoicism in the face of brutal cold, and this profound disconnection from modernization and technology. He was seen as a champion against homogenization.
And the local culture, the music, stepped in to cement that narrative.
Immediately. Topical songs emerged to build his legend. Stanley Keach's song, What the North Pond Hermit Knows, it doesn't focus on the crime at all. It focuses on the extreme survival, talking about sleeping outside when it's 25 below.
And then it contrasts his life with modern life.
Right, the song then contrasts Knight's resilience with the community's own modern failings. The lyric is, we're losing touch with nature and we don't know how it flows.
So the hermit became a cultural touchstone, a symbol of resistance for the ideal of self-sufficiency against the, quote, encroachment of modernization.
A living symbol.
But while the hermit and the barefoot bandit are these powerful individual symbols, how does that energy translate into collective solidarity, into opposition against entrenched economic power?
That's where protest music comes in. Specifically, the practice of adapting historical songs of resistance. The best example is probably, which side are you on?
Originally from the 1930s, right?
1931, written by Florence Reese during the violent Harlan County coal miners' strike. And it wasn't just a song, it was a potent song of persuasion, designed to just shatter any idea of neutrality.
The premise is pretty unforgiving. You have to choose a side. The lyric is, there are no neutrals there.
Exactly. And that core message of forced solidarity has given the tune incredible durability. It lets it be recycled and retooled for contemporary power struggles decade after decade.
And we've seen this happen very recently.
Oh, absolutely. Dathy Wolf, for instance, adapted the melody and the message during the 2011 Wisconsin uprising, reframing the opposition. The song urged workers to stand together against the specific political and economic entities they saw as attacking their rights. The source material from that time, it identifies these opponents as the billionaires and the Koch machine.
And it's important to state, this is the language of the protesters in that context.
Okay.
They're using the song to identify and mobilize against their specific targets.
Yes, it's about personalizing the power struggle. It moves the abstract concept of capitalism into concrete opposition figures. We also see Morgana Warner-Evans adapting the song to criticize Maine Governor Paul LePage, focusing her lyrics on defending public school teachers and unions, and organizing the people against what they perceived as the prevailing capitalist system.
So the function of these adaptations, it's about creating a connection to history.
It's critical. They link these contemporary movements directly back to a long tradition of rewriting songs, echoing figures like Joe Hill and Woody Guthrie. And that act, it lends incredible historical legitimacy to modern movements. It tells the participants, your local struggle is part of a century-long shared identity of resistance.
Okay, let's try to synthesize this whole journey. We began with Willie Sutton robbing banks, because that's where the money was. The allure of the classic outlaw was financial defiance. That evolved into the 21st century outlaw, like the Barefoot Bandit, whose goal was often a kind of romanticized rebellion against the constraints of the material world itself.
Against centralized systems, yeah.
And finally, we saw protest music focusing on where the power and the threats to identity reside today, in homogenization, in government actions, in corporatized economic structures. In every single case, the allure of the outlaw figure lies in their defiance of a system that's deemed too powerful.
And what really sticks with you are those dramatic moments where the system was just temporarily outwitted. Dillinger's subtle but devastating police uniform disguise. The fact that Sutton's cunning literally forced law enforcement to develop systematic psychological profiling.
Or just the sheer reckless abandon of the Barefoot Bandit crashing 3 stolen planes across 2 countries. It's like he was showing that the physical limits of geography were just irrelevant to his pursuit of autonomy.
They didn't matter to him at all.
So here is the provocative thought for you to mull over. If the goal of the classic outlaw was material wealth, and the goal of the modern outlaw figure is often this romanticized rebellion against the material world, what does our continuing fascination with these heroes reveal about our own relationship with authority, with identity, with the price of making it in this technologically saturated world?
And if the ultimate target has shifted from literal money to autonomy, what is the new bank that has to be robbed today to reclaim selfhood or resistance?